I'm gonna love you.
Okay, in this position here, bishop plays to c4, going ahead with the plan that we had said before, where the bishop attacks the pawn on e6. Now black gets out of the way of the pin with king h8. Fischer plays queen h3 with a double attack on the e6 pawn here, and also giving up the pawn on b2. But it's important to note that the pawn on b2 is not as important as the pawn on e6. So Fischer would like for Spassky to go ahead and snap that pawn off so he can snap the pawn off on e6. And then he's really going to be marching up the board. Now, Spassky doesn't do that. He plays knight to f8 here. But if he would have played rook takes b2, then bishop takes pawn, and then knight f8, and then the bishop goes back to c4, with leaving white with a much, much better game, easier game to play, and he would be winning in this position. So Spassky realized that, and he played knight f8 right away. Fischer played b3, and that pretty much locks up the queen side right there, where that rook on b8 is not doing anything right now. a5, trying to loosen up the queen side. Fischer goes on with his plans. f5, f takes e, rook takes f5, opening up the king side. Knight h7, and rook f1, rook c f1. Now here, black was trying to entice white into playing rook f7, because that looks like an awesome move there. But actually, that would fall victim to some tactics here. Black could just play knight g5, and then that would fork the queen and fork the rook. White takes queen. Knight takes queen with check, though. G takes h, and then rook takes rook. And then black would have been up in exchange after that. So that was like a little trap there that Spassky was leaving out there for Fischer, but Fischer didn't fall for it though. He played rook c to f1, queen d8. Now you have so many threats here. You've got, white with pressure on the g7 square. You got the bishop, and you got both rooks lined up, all on that f7 square. That f7 square is so loaded up. So white is coming with a lot of pressure right here. Rook e7, and actually black is just unable to prevent white from attacking. It's so much pressure right here. So he's just hoping that white will rush in his attack and mess things up, basically. h4 is a good move because it keeps the knight out from going to g5. And now the knight doesn't really have any squares to go to. So the knight is kind of trapped. Rook b7. e6, which is basically putting more stability on that f7 square. And it also, going back, also b6 freed up. It was like a clearance move, so the rook could hit the c5 pawn as well. So then black plays rook c7 to protect the c5 pawn. Queen e5, just getting his queen and improving the position of his queen. Black goes to queen e8. If knight f6 here, rook takes knight, g takes, rook takes, and that's going to be a done deal for black because white would just take on h6 and then play rook h8 checkmate. So that's why black played queen e8 instead of knight to f6. And here Fischer played a4, which is just another great example of how he's not rushing his attack. He's shoring up everything across the whole board. He's making sure that black doesn't have any chances of any types of counterplay. Queen d8. So really, black doesn't have anything besides shuffling his pieces back and forth. He's just trying to lock down his fort because he doesn't have any counterplay of his own. Rook 1 f2. White's just putting his pieces in the most active squares, the best squares, and black is just shuffling back and forth. Rook 2 f3, keeping an eye on that d pawn because that's really black's only hope is for him to try to push the d pawn. Black goes back to d8. Now Fischer plays bishop d3, which is on a great diagonal. It's setting up a battery for a violent attack coming up. And then black is just still shuffling back and forth because he doesn't really have anything. What else does he have? Fischer continues with his plan. Queen e4. This game really shows how white just immobilized black. That's what I really get from this game here, is that white just completely immobilized black's forces. Now, he played knight f6, which he had to play because he could have played rook f8 check, and then that would have been it would have been game over, because then after the knight takes, like if he would have played something else, let's just say a waiting move here, then white could have played rook takes and then knight takes, rook takes again, check, and then checkmate. So that would have been a disaster. So he played knight f6. Now here, Fischer plays an incredible move. Rook takes knight. G takes. Rook takes. And the king goes to g8. Now in this position here, black plans on just blocking all of Fischer's checks with his rooks. So he's just going to try to block whatever advances that Fischer has. Bishop c4, which is an awesome move, because now if the pawn ever moves, it's going to be with check, and it's going to be devastating. So the king moves off of that diagonal, king h8, and then Fischer plays the ending and crushing move here, which is queen f4, and then Spassky resigns here because there is nothing left for him to do. Let's just say, for example, if he would have played he plays queen f4, but let's just say he played rook takes h6, check, rook h7, queen check, and then that's what I'm saying about Spassky could have stayed in the game longer. He could have just blocked all of Fischer's advances and checks, and he would have been able to prolong the game that way. So instead of doing that, Fischer played the queen f4 move instead. And let's just say if the king, he resigned, but if he would have just moved the king back to, let's say, g8, then Fischer would have played queen takes h6. And then there was nothing for black to do. Let's say black would have pushed to d3. And now you have rook g6 check, rook g7 to block. Now you have that devastating e7 push with check. And the game is just completely over at this point here. He would have to use his queen to block. And then you can mate in a couple different ways. You could actually just play queen takes rook here, checkmate, or you could promote and do it that way as well. So that's devastating. So that was an awesome game right there. That was the game of the century. Some consider that the best game ever played. With that game there, Fischer took the lead in the match, and then he would go on to actually win that world championship. And Boris Spassky had so much respect for Fischer after that game that he actually stood and applauded Fischer along with the audience. So that was a great, great act of sportsmanship there. So Bobby Fischer made history winning that world championship, and he will definitely always be in the history books for it. Okay, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.